Welcome back to FairyTale Nails. Today's story and nail design is the Magic Kettle. This story originated in Japan, and comparative to the other stories I've read so far, it seems like the least violent. There's no one trying to eat children, and it all seems to have like a happy, peaceful moral. So it is okay to have your children in the room while you watch this nail design. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please comment below if you have any questions or would like to hear specific stories, and we'll get on to the story. Thanks, guys. Once upon a time, there lived in Japan an old man who was very poor. He lived all alone in a small house halfway up a mountain, and he had made himself a beautiful garden around his house. He was too poor to buy plants for it, so he went up and down the mountain digging up the most beautiful wildflowers he could find to replant in his garden. Soon he had such a wonderful collection of flowers, trees, and shrubs that people traveled miles just to look at them. One evening, the old man was sitting in his house, resting after the day's work. He had slid back the paper walls of his room because it was so warm, and because he wanted to smell his trees and flowers. Suddenly, he heard a kind of rustling noise behind him. He turned round and was surprised to see a dusty old iron kettle in a corner which had been empty just a moment before. The kettle was one of those very heavy brown ones that his grandmother used to boil water when he was just a little boy. So you can imagine how old it must have been. He had no idea how it came to be in his house, for he had never set eyes on it before. He picked the kettle up, blew the dust off it, and carried it into the kitchen. "This is a piece of luck," he said to himself. "A good kettle costs money, and my old one is thin and cracked. In fact, it's beginning to leak." He poured water into the kettle and put it on the fire to boil. Soon, the water in the kettle began to warm up and to sing in the way that water does when it's heating. Then, a strange thing happened. So strange that the old man had to rub his eyes to make sure he wasn't dreaming. First, the handle of the kettle began to change shape. It became a head. And when it had become the size it wanted to be, the spout began to move and grow into a tail. Then, the body grew 4 paws and a lot of fur, so that it began to look like a kind of badger called a Tanuki. The little animal jumped off the fire and ran around the room like a kitten, climbing up the paper walls and over the ceiling, and then down a screen, so that the old man began to fear that it would tear his room to pieces. He ran out to ask his neighbor for help, and between them, they managed to catch the Tanuki and lock it up safely in a wooden chest. Then, feeling quite exhausted, they sat down and tried to decide what to do next. "If I were you," said the neighbor, "I would sell it." So the old man called to a child who was passing the house to go and fetch Jimu, the trader. When Jimu arrived, the old man said to him, "I have something I want to get rid of." With that, he carefully lifted the lid of the wooden chest in which he had shut up the Tanuki. But, to his surprise, the animal had vanished, and in its place was the kettle. "Well, that's very odd. It's disappeared. But I can sell you this kettle instead. How much will you give me for it?" the old man asked Jimu. Jimu thought the kettle wasn't worth much, but he agreed to buy it for a few yen. He was walking down the mountain with the kettle under his arm when he noticed that it was getting very heavy. And by the time he reached his house, he was feeling so tired that he went straight to bed and fell asleep at once. In the middle of the night, he was awoken by a loud noise in the corner where he had put the kettle. He sat up to see what it could be, but there was only the kettle by the wall, and so he lay back again. He had just dozed off when he was woken again by a loud crash. He jumped up, picked up a lamp, and went over to the corner. To his amazement, he saw that the kettle had become a small furry Tanuki, which was running around and round, chasing its tail. Then it ran out into the balcony and turned a few somersaults. Jimu scratched his head and wondered what he should do with the animal. He decided to let the problem rest until morning. and went back to bed. But when he opened his eyes the next day, there was no Tanuki, only the old kettle that he had set in the corner the night before. As soon as he had had breakfast, Jimu went off to tell his neighbor, a wise old man who listened carefully and said, "I am not surprised at what you tell me. I remember, when I was a boy, that someone in the valley had a magic kettle. If I were you, I'd go and travel with it and show it to people for 3 yen at a time, and you'll become rich." "I must ask the Tanuki's permission to do that," said Jimu, and he thanked his friend for his advice. The Tanuki agreed gladly, for it liked to show people how it could chase its tail and turn somersaults. Jimu built a handsome booth for it and wrote out a handbill describing the wonder. And he painted a picture of it for those who could not read the handbill. People came in great numbers to see the show, and Jimu's fame spread far and wide. At every performance, the kettle would be passed from hand to hand, looked at carefully inside and out, and handed back to Jimu. He would then set it on a platform and command it to become a tanuki. Immediately, the handle began to change into a head, the spout into a tail, and 4 paws appeared, 2 from each side. "Dance," said Jimu, and the tanuki stretched itself and began to move from side to side so gracefully that people could not stop themselves from joining in and dancing too. The tanuki led them into one dance after another until Jimu told it to stop. Then the booth would be closed and people would leave to make room for those who had been waiting outside to watch the next performance. So many people came to see this strange act that Jimu soon became rich. But he kept thinking of the simple old man who had sold him the kettle. He knew how poor he was, and it seemed to him unjust that the gains had been so unevenly divided between them. One morning he put up 100 gold pieces into the kettle, hung it on his arm, and once more climbed the mountain to see the old man. "I have earned as much as a man needs for the rest of his life from this kettle," he told the old man. "Now I have brought it back to you, so that you can enjoy the wealth that it brings too." The old man thanked Jimu and praised his honesty. Thanks to the magic kettle, they both were able to live in comfort to the end of their lives and were beloved and respected by all who knew them. The end. Thank you so much for watching this episode of FairyTale Nails. It was so much fun creating kettle nails and learning about what a tanuki was. I had to look it up online just to see. It's such a cute little character. And so I thought it would be really fun to create tanuki nails with a little kawaii picture on it. And I thought that was fun because it seems very Japanese. Next week's episode is called Agnello and His Little Speckled Hen. I don't know this story, but I'm feeling a little bit concerned because the pictures are very random and I don't know what's going to happen. So tune in next week and we'll find out together. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you have any questions or comments, please comment below. Please like this video so it can get out to other people, and we would love to be able to share these old fairy tales and some fun creative nail art designs. Thank you so much. I love you guys, and I will see you next week. See ya. Bye.